in Genesis how God created the heavens and the earth, how God made all things, how he separated the light from the darkness, and then he made man. He gathered man up and he fashioned him out of the dust of the earth, making him bound to this earth, earthly in nature. But then he did something special. He breathed into Adam the breath of life. He breathed in him. When he created Adam, he created him in a unique position. He created him with enough to be a man, but yet had enough of a touch that the woman was inside of him. And therefore, Adam was not the man that was born in the usual fashion. He wasn't born as a baby and went through the process of growing and learning. But Adam was born, when the breath was breathed in him, he became a living soul. And then all souls that were born after that came as a result of Adam. Adam was born in the image of God. If you looked at God, if you could see him, you would see the features of him in Adam. Adam had an evolved vocabulary. He had an evolved intelligence. And this is proven in the book of Genesis. God fellowshiped with him. He was in fellowship. They walked and they talked in the evening. He was a spiritual being in the beginning. He walked with God. God breathed on him and gave him life. And so as the scripture says that the first man was a living soul. And so when God got ready to create the woman, he put Adam to sleep and he pulled what he put inside of him. He put life inside of Adam. He put life-giving ability in Adam, and he pulled what he put into him out. And it became the woman. And he looked at the woman, and God let him say what the woman was going to be. And he said, she is a woman. She has the same nature as I have. She has the same life force that I have, because he breathed the breath of life and made him a living soul. And now out of his living soul came another human being. And the process will repeat itself over and over again. He put him in the garden, and God, they had all that they could eat in the garden. They were vegetarians. I want you to know that they were vegetarians. And they had rivers that ran through the garden. And it was beautiful and it was magnificent. It's also said in the garden that it wasn't too hot. It wasn't too cold. It never rained. All days were sunny days in the garden. Would you like to be in the garden now? All days, sunny days. All days, they're hovering around 75 to 80 degrees. Wasn't too hot in the day, wasn't too cold in the night. They were in the ideal setting. And God came down in the garden. He walked in the cool of the evening as it began to cool down to the set temperature that God had allowed. The trees bore fruit year around. They bore fruit. And God only had one request of him. Don't eat of the tree. You can eat of all these other trees, but don't eat in the tree that comes from the middle of the garden, in the midst of the garden. That tree of life, don't eat from it. This man, Adam, had such an evolved sense of vocabulary that when God had created all the animals, he sat back in heaven and marveled to see how his son would name the animals. And anything that Adam said it was, it became that. You are associated now because and it seemed to me that he gave Adam the ability to name them. Delegated authority. Delegated, just like he delegates authority to the saints. Delegated authority. And God was pleased with his creation. God was pleased with them. And man was in fellowship with God. Man was connected to God. Even in the old traditions, I believe that they heard the songs of the angels in heaven because they were so connected with God. But then it happened. Because in the Garden of Eden, there was no mention of sin. There was no mention. What is sin? What is the concept of disobedience? It did not exist in where Adam resided. Note this, that the aging process was not put in play until sin entered the picture. So we really don't have an accurate description on how old Adam was when he died, because we don't know how long he went before they sinned. The concept of blame was not in the garden. The concept of lying was not in the garden. These things did not exist. God functions in a fashion of being absolute. Whatever God says, it happens. And his creation on earth functioned in a way that the absolute word of God transformed the landscape around him, and he stayed obedient. But then one day, deception came and introduced itself. If you eat of the tree, you shall not surely die, but you'll be like God. He's hiding something from you. He's not telling you the whole truth. And the seed grew to the point that now man is ready to walk in disobedience. And that's what happens to people. That is not a new concept for someone to tell you. They ain't telling you the truth. He says, when you eat this fruit, you're going to be like God. But how can you say that the creation would be like God when they were born in the image of God? They function on earth as if they were walking under the authority of God. What more could you have? And they took of the fruit. One of the first things that they recognized, they were naked. They become earthly. They couldn't see themselves being without clothes until they took of the fruit. They got something else got introduced. They got very vain at this point. We ain't got on no clothes. Let's sew some leaves together. See, when you pluck a leaf off a tree, that leaf goes into a process of dying. And that's what was happening. When they began to walk, they committed that sin, they began to die. And you can mark day number 1 on their lives at that point, because sin caused